Hello, everyone. This is Sean Smith, and you are tuned in to the Kountryfried Outdoors Chasing Your Experience podcast. The podcast that will connect you to resources regionally and nationwide to engage them and you in open, honest discussions so that we can inspire the growth that you need to chase the experience you want. So strap yourself in because here we go. Hello, everyone. This is Sean Smith, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Kountryfried Outdoors Chasing Your Experience podcast. I got Sammy Dunlap on the other line. Say what's up, Sam.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
There he is. We got a good one for you guys today because we got a few things we're going to discuss, but the most important thing that we're going to talk about is Sam's first mule deer since he moved over to Colorado. But before we start talking about a buck, Sam, did you hear about the possible, now I've heard new world record, but definitely a possible Ohio record for a typical deer being shot this year?
Yeah. Was hard to miss with all the emails and articles on social media coming out about it. It was pretty exciting news for the state.
Yeah, like there's a lot of buzz going on there. And have you seen, well, obviously through the social medias, but have you seen a picture of this thing?
Yeah. Along with the emails, I think Meat Eater had an article on it. And pretty much every site there is to talk about hunting had something to talk about it. And the pictures were, impressive. It's a world record potential buck, so they're always going to be impressive.
Yeah, this is a quite a massive deer. If you've not seen it, the name is that has shot it was CJ Alexander, and he was featured in like a 3-hour podcast under the Hunter podcast with Jared and what's the other guy's name? I want to say Jake, or Jacob is the other guy's name, but I could be completely wrong. But they had him on there. I think they were like the first ones to talk to him, and it was like a 3-hour long podcast. Have you heard like any details about the hunt itself?
No, I actually am oblivious, and I actually didn't know that there was an interview done on a podcast already. But that's something I'm going to definitely have to listen to after we get through this.
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of like the very small meat and potatoes. The way this works out is that I'm not going to go get into this guy's history or anything like that. Just going to do the very brief of like the hunt itself. He
Sounds good.
Claims that he hunted his sister's property, which happens to be, I think, her mother-in-law or somewhere along those lines also resides on this property. And he says he has written permission to hunt this property. It's like a 30-acre tract or something like that, right? And there's no cameras running on this property, and he's hunting it kind of blind. He sits a full day, didn't see anything, goes back the next day. And I think I think it wasn't very long in the day, I don't think, but he ends up seeing this monster deer that he has never seen before in his life. And he ends up taking a shot at it with a crossbow. Long story short, like it wasn't a great shot, so they kind of backed out, went and recovered it later, so on and so forth, brought it back. It's been green scored at gross close to like 235 inches as a typical whitetail.
Gosh, that's just impressive, man.
That's
any animal of that magnitude, deer wise, that's something to behold.
No, that's freaking massive, right? And so he's there for like 3 hours talking to these guys, and he kind of explains like, that the game warden has reached out to him, and it sounded like the way it was originally presented, like it sounded like the game warden, because of this being such a large deer, wanted to kind of like get a jump on anything that might come out, right? Wanted to come out and see things. And so he took the game warden over to go check out, the location where he said he shot the deer, so on and so forth. And he goes on, he kind of tells a story about when they get there, his sister's mom, or I think she might be like a sister-in-law or something like that. Like, I don't remember the exact details. You'd have to listen to the whole podcast, and I encourage everyone else to listen to it as well. But he says that when they get there, that the mom comes out, and he prefaces that she doesn't like him to begin with, and comes out, and the game warden kind of asks a couple questions, and she responds back, "I don't even know who that is." looking at him, right? So
Wow.
he tried to kind of smooth it over with the game warden. They went, and he showed him the quote unquote evidence of like the kill site, right? You know,
Hmm.
so that's neither here nor there, and like I said, go listen to the whole podcast. There's some deep family story stuff in there. It was a pretty interesting lead, and also I really would suggest that you watch it on YouTube, so that you can maybe pick up on what other people are saying that they're picking up on during that, by his body language, things like that. But
Just kind of strange mannerisms they're noticing.
yeah, like they were asking him, like, have you ever, has anybody come forward with pictures? Has anyone, come to you? Because I'm sorry to say, in the state of Ohio, there probably aren't very many secret large deer. Like, if they're in an area that is reasonably huntable by somebody, they probably have a picture of this deer. Somebody somewhere, has probably seen this deer, and you're probably not the only person hunting this deer.
Absolutely. Most of the time you got someone, a neighboring property, that's going to come up and be like, I had pictures of that deer. I've got sheds from that deer for the last, however many years. And they were holding it secret, but you can pretty well assume anyone with a camera in the woods within your 5 miles of your property may have a picture of that deer.
Yeah, and that's, in Ohio, we got a lot of small tracts of land. Like 180 acres to most is like a big farm. Like, most of the time when you come across property you hunt, it's somewhere between 20 and 50 acres that someone is going to let you hunt. So that I don't care how large the buck is or how much of a homebody that buck is, that 20, 50, even 100-acre property is not going to be his home. it's not going to
Yeah,
be
he's moving,
it's not going to be the only place that he's visiting, right?
especially once
Anyways,
sweet, sweet November kicks in.
right? Anyways, so fast forward, I'm on that Go Wild social media app, and Outdoor Life post a post on there because it's an article that they wrote regarding that this buck is actually under investigation for poaching, and the details that they give are very slim, are very small. And they basically state that the ODNR has confiscated, and please don't take this as verbatim, I'm just trying to go off in memory. They have confiscated the rack, the cape, and the hunting instruments that were used to harvest the deer, on the premise that there is an allegation that CJ, the young man who shot the deer, did not have permission to be on the property he actually shot the deer on.
So I guess my bigger question is this stemming from allegations from whomever was living on the property he alleged to shoot the deer, or did he potentially not even shoot that deer on said property?
That I'm glad you brought that up because I was had some little inner turmoil because I had listened to the original podcast, right? And he claims he shot on his sister's property, and it sounded like there was turmoil with this mother figure that lived there. And he said he had this permission or written permission. And I was sitting there, and I have a law enforcement background, and I was telling myself, I'm like, I understand that Ohio has a pretty straightforward law that says you're supposed to have written permission to hunt a private land. The end. Like, it's very black and white.
And generally, that's just a good idea anyway, is to get the written permission. That way, say you're fortunate enough to have an event and a deer of that magnitude walk into your life, um,
Yeah,
to have your P's and Q's and all your ends buttoned up. That way, if something as this does happen, you can be sitting loud and proud like Dustin Huff with that incredible deer he shot in Indiana.
absolutely. But on the same token, I'm like, if this is family land and they have granted him permission to hunt it, and I've got friends in the ODNR, like I know a few people. I'm like, that would be pretty crappy of you as a law enforcement agency to hem this guy up if he did shoot it on family property that he otherwise had permission to be on. You know what I mean? Regardless if he had, because that'd be the same. It's not the same, but I'm practically an agent for one of the farms that I hunt. Right, I have a key. I pretty much have full free reign of this entire property. That would be the same if I shot a deer of that caliber there, and then they hem me up for the same thing, because I don't have written permission to be there. I don't have anything in my hand from that landowner, other than I have the key to the gate and I can call him right then and there or text him and he'll tell you I'm allowed to be there. That's all I've got. And I get
lock and key's pretty good evidence of permission.
Well, you would hope, but you just never know. And I know in an earlier podcast I defended law enforcement, ODNR, and stuff like that, or just your parks and wildlife in general about those encounters. But this would be one of those instances that if that is the case, that you're kind of hurting your own community bank account with that. Like, that's kind of a crappy move to pull, like, regardless of what caliber deer this is, right? So
yes, sir.
So additionally, on top of that, though, like, and this is just like stuff this is all speculation. Like, there's nothing that is ODNR has not come out with any other information officially about the case. Or where everything's recovered from, like, nothing. Like, there's nothing else official. What I'm relaying, and maybe I shouldn't, because I don't want to be the one giving out false information. So please take this with a grain of salt, that this is just strictly speculation. And I encourage each and every one of you who is listening to investigate this on your own and do your own research into this. But
and all the information that we've gotten and seen has all been online, and anybody can get out there and find what we've just discussed.
Right. And the common story that goes with this is that the buck was potentially shot actually 15 miles away from where he originally said that he shot it, on a property that he would not have had permission on. Now,
man, it's a shame. It's such a shame, like, what big antlers can do to somebody.
And that's even if he's actually guilty of that. Like, first and foremost, I'm not taking sides on this one, because and the reason I really got involved in this a little bit more was because somebody in that original post that was done on Outdoor Life or for the Go Wild app said, well, whatever happened to being innocent until proven guilty, right? And I agree with that. Like, he's not been tried yet. I don't want to, like, go raid his house with pitchforks and torches, because he could actually, he could potentially have actually shot the deer legally, right? And we're just going through the steps to make sure. Like, there's some allegations been made. We don't have all the evidence. Like, we don't see all the evidence in front of us. It has been tried. It has been weighed. None of that. So I'm not saying the young man is guilty of it, and I certainly hope that he didn't, because that is a freaking hammer of a buck. And not only does our passion, our pursuit deserve better than that deer definitely deserve better than that to have been poached by somebody.
Hopefully this kid is truthful with law enforcement, and on the silver lining side, he would come through it all and there wouldn't be anything that taints it, and it would just be a beautiful situation for the guy, which is what we all hope. And hopefully the allegations aren't true, but if they are, man, what you said is spot on.
Right. And I'm gonna say it this way. I'm like, CJ, if you ever listen to this, I know you probably don't listen. If you're innocent of this, dude, I'm rooting for you. But if you did break a law, if you did do something that you shouldn't have done, and you did it, I got to root for ODNR and give them the win on this if they actually catch you doing something you shouldn't have, because you've stolen from the tribe if you did, and that you get what you get. And I don't know if you know this, but if you do the calculation, if you take the green score, and if the actual green score of 235 is correct, the gross score, his fine or restitution to the state could be as much as $31,000. If he's
assumingly the 5-year forfeiture of a license. I'm sure
there'll be more than that. The 5-year forfeiture, or something else, or who knows? They could come to the plea deal, and there'd be between him and the state will come up with a plea bargain, and maybe not be as stiff as a penalty, but the way that the our ODNR or our wildlife rules are written, that there's a formula. And someone has once explained it to me. I forget what it is off the top of my head, but the way it figured out is that with that 235-inch deer, the fine is about, or the restitution cost is about $31,000.
And I believe in one of the articles I read last night was anything over 125 inches qualifies as a trophy, I believe, by definition. So,
Right,
and the fines start to go up as those inches get bigger.
Which that goes along with the almost like the Pope and Young Club. I think Pope and Young's 120 for a whitetail to be entered into them. Okay. So that's kind of close to their minimum standard. How big buck is 140, and what is Boone and Crockett? I always want to say 160, but I think it's 170.
I don't know. I will never be fortunate enough to slam anything big enough to enter any of those books.
Oh, I don't know. I think that one whitetail you had would probably make it to Pope and Young if you'd have shot it with a bow.
I did not. So
I know you didn't. I know the one whitetail buck you have the skull mount for. That was a shotgun kill. So,
yep, he's still a great deer, and we're proud of that one.
Hey, it is a great deer, and I don't care how you got it, as long as it's legal, which we know it was. I'm not saying you would do anything like that, but I don't care if it was with a shotgun, rifle, or bow. Congratulations! Like I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
But speaking of bucks, let's shift gears here and let's kind of talk about your first mule deer buck. What do you think?
Well, where do you want me to start? We could start with the wife's tag the year before that led into this tag in the same unit in the exact same spot that she had a shot at her first mule deer buck. We were unfortunate and weren't able to connect on it, but it was a fun experience and a learning experience at that. But I can start with that or move right into day one of hunting on this side of the hill.
You know what? Let's start with your previous year with the wife because I think that's part of your. I think that goes into the story, and that's kind of what kind of led you to go back there. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's start there.
Absolutely. So it was the 2021 season. We'd finally gained residency in the state of Colorado, so we didn't have to pay astronomical numbers for a tag. And she was able to draw her first mule deer tag in the unit that we live near. And so she got it, and we started prepping, doing some shed hunting in a vicinity and getting trail cameras out, doing all the basic legwork. We weren't really getting any pictures of anything because at the time that area is used through the summer and early fall as cattle grazing range. And as we all know, not too many wild things like to be near all those cows. And so I got a lot of trail cam pictures of cattle. We did pick up some antlers, but they were all elk antlers. Not a bad thing, but not the sign we wanted to see. But we continued to hammer it out and going out scouting, seeing deer here and there. Eventually, that October tag came. It was end of October into beginning of November for the second rifle tag. Once that came, we hunted as hard as we could through the weekend, sitting all day, staring into the sun. And it was pretty warm that year, too. So I think the one day Emily even got a sunburn. But we're sitting there pouring the glass to it. We had seen 2 deer and about a dozen other hunters over the course of that weekend. And then the week came, it was back to work, try and get out on the evenings. But you know how that goes. Sometimes you get tired after work and you really just don't feel like it. But I had been up valley working the one day and it had been raining. And I noticed as I was driving around, there were deer out everywhere that day. I mean, they were everywhere. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, it's pouring rain. What are these deer doing? Only having whitetail experience previous. Like, they should be bedded down, dropped off in a hollow or valley ravine somewhere. But nope, they seem to like the rain. So I get home, I text her before she gets off. I said, hey, when you get off, hustle home. We're going to get out for an evening hunt. So she gets here and we load up and hustle to the location we'd been going and climb down the mountain, go through the fence from BLM to National Forest, and set up to pour more glass. At this time, it's kind of getting colder, but it's still kind of drizzly and gray, and just a day nobody really wants to be out. So we had the whole hillside to ourselves. Um, and as we're sitting there, if we're looking and looking, it seemed like as if these deer just materialized. Now, they'd been there the whole time, and we snuck in and didn't even know they were there. And as we eventually picked them up, we noticed what appeared to be a cactus buck at 300, 350 yards. The gun we had with us was the 350 Legend, so that was out of the question.
So what did you call him? You say cactus buck?
Yeah, he was a cactus buck.
So
and
what does that mean?
That's characterized by a buck that's got a funky rack, still in velvet. There are a few things that cause it. One of those being low testosterone in the buck, which causes him to not shed his velvet. Another could be an injury to the genitals. A lot of times you hear about deer crossing a barbed wire fence and unfortunately getting their bits hung up.
Whoopsie daisy.
Not a good day to have if you're that guy.
No, it's not.
And so we're sitting there staring at these deer, and we managed to pick out a younger forkhorn, and I mean, he was barely a forkhorn. He was probably an inch away from being a spike if he didn't have those little kickers coming off the top. And he was mixed in with a group of doe. The cactus buck, like I said, was out of range and hanging out with another doe. And I asked her, it's her tag. What do you want to do? We can try and move in to get the bigger one, the cactus buck. I mean, from 300 yards, you could see the antlers pretty well. And like I said, it was her decision. It's her deer. And she made the decision to go after the little bit smaller one because size didn't matter. She's just been working hard to try and get her first deer on the ground. And so we move into about 150, 180 yards, somewhere in there, to get the younger buck. And her first shot just missed. I saw the shot hit just behind his back. And they kind of scattered, but they didn't really scatter away. They just kind of scattered about, if you know what I'm saying. Like, they didn't go far. They just stayed in the vicinity of a relative distance.
Yeah.
And
how far
moved left to right more so than out of the picture.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. How far was the shot again?
It was between 150 and 180 yards.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, well, at that distance, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't, first and foremost, I've never hunted mule deer. But some of the examples I know from like whitetail, sometimes at those distances, they just don't really know what happened. So they
and it didn't seem like they did. They'd heard the shot and it rattled them, but not to a point to where it spooked them. And that 350 Legend isn't a loud gun, and I think that played to our benefit.
Yeah, that 350 Legend. The reason you have that one is because you being an Ohio native, and you purchased that one for Ohio season. Because if you're not from Ohio, then you probably don't know this. But especially if you're a Coloradian, listen to this. Like, why are you using that? Because in Ohio you have to use straight wall cartridges, and the 350 Legend is a straight wall cartridge for a rifle season for deer. So,
yep, and we had bought it and thought that our next gun season we'd get to break it out. Our next gun season in Ohio, we'd get to break it out and see what we could do with a whitetail and a 350 Legend. But unbeknownst to us at the time, we were going to be moving prior to that season. And, I looked up the ballistics charts and, how many foot-pounds it's putting out where and if it would be ethical for a mule deer. And, shooting a 175 grain bullet, everything lined up to where I felt comfortable that wouldn't have an issue taking down a mule deer.
Yeah, what would have been your comfortable effective range? Like, let me rephrase that.
Okay.
If you had you didn't have like you weren't worried about accuracy. You knew you were going to hit the target, right?
Mhm.
Regardless of the distance, what if you were looking at those charts, you're looking at the ballistics, what would have been your furthest distance that you would have felt that round would have been effective?
Absolute max would have been 250 yards.
Okay.
After that, you're losing a lot of velocity. You start getting a lot of drop in the bullet, and you also start to lose a lot of kinetic energy.
Okay. Nope, that's fair. Sounds fair.
Some people may say otherwise, but for me, that would be, even on a whitetail, 250 would be the stop. That's it. Don't push it.
Yeah, I'm a firearms instructor, and let me tell you, like, the only thing anybody that does anything with firearms, if you put three of us in a room, the only thing that is going to get agreed upon is that two of us are going to agree that the third guy has no idea what he's talking about. And I say that because, like, you're absolutely right. Like this is, you feel that this is sufficient at that range, and there'll probably be somebody that will come out and say that, you're dumb. That's no way. Or there'll be the ones that'll tell you, oh no, they'll stretch out way further than that. So don't get caught up on that. Like it's what you feel comfortable with. So absolutely.
Yep. And I've been told by whitetail hunters, or at least one, that they're not a fan of the 350 Legend. They shot, I believe they were using a 150 grain bullet. I'm not sure what make, but they lost the deer. And now, whether or not that was to a poor shot placement or if maybe that bullet wasn't enough, I find it hard to believe that 150 grains wasn't enough.
Well, let me tell you this. I don't know if I should. Um, let's say I've seen deer be shot and killed with something a lot less than the 350 Legend.
Yeah, I can
So
see it. I mean, you guys got guys that, hunt with revolvers at close ranges. And I mean, it is a lot less than a 350, but they're still dropping hammer deer down with those.
right, and so you know what? I don't want to, like call somebody onto the table for this, but it could be a shot placement.
It
And
could be. I don't know for sure. I just know that their opinion was they weren't a fan. Me personally, I not to get too far ahead of the story. My shot placement was where it should have been, and this deer went 20 yards and fell over.
right, it's like me and rage broadheads. Like I don't have a problem. Like I don't shoot rage broadheads. I used to. I used to love them, and I started having issues with them. Right. And I just don't like them. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of success with them. Like, and I'm not telling you not to shoot them. Like, I personally won't shoot them anymore because from my experience, I just didn't like them. And it's probably the same for these guys and gals who don't like the 350 Legend. So, I get it.
Everybody's got their own experience, and we've all got one of some kind of product that has left a bad taste in our mouth.
Absolutely. And trust me, there have been, well, outside of like a Muzzy, I'm pretty sure there's been more deer killed with a Rage broadhead, no matter what model it was, than probably any other broadhead that exists.
Yeah.
But anyways, so let's get back to so you guys decide. So back to the wife. You guys had that about 150 yard shot. Deer kind of scattered, like kind of not like took off on a dead sprint, but kind of scattered. Let's go from there.
Yeah, definitely got them jumped up and kind of aware that we were there now. Like I said, I'd seen the shot hit just above the back of the smaller buck, and then they scattered. So we decided, they were not acting spooky. So we're like, well, we'll move in, try and get a closer shot. Well, we moved in and it's raining still and it's muddy. So we didn't really get moved in much closer. And we set up for another shot. And we all know how it is when it's cold and rainy. You start getting your eye close to that scope or any of your optics, and you start dealing with fog issues. The heat from your body's coming off that cold glass, and now you've got a little bit of a sight problem. So she's doing what she can to try and pick this buck back up in the scope. And she found him, and I asked her if she was ready for it. She said, yep, she was confident enough in her shot. And I'm looking through my binoculars. I felt confidence exuding off of her. I mean, in my mind, as soon as she squeezed that trigger, this deer was going to be rolling down the hill in the mud. And watching and waiting and watching and waiting, and she fires off another one, and I didn't see where the shot hit on this one, but she had unfortunately missed again. And as we stood there, they moved closer after the second shot. They moved in towards us, but it seemed like the doe that were around that smaller buck just kind of knew what was going on and started covering him up. So by the end of the evening, we never got a third shot on that deer, and unfortunately never got to take that deer. The rest of the season we hunted hard, but just never got to get as close as we did that day. And that's the precursor that led into me putting in the draw for the same unit and same tag that she had. And we can move into that if you're ready.
Yeah.
Or
So
you have more questions about her hunt.
No. And no, I think you actually covered it pretty well. Well, first off, I wasn't there to really know what the exact details was, but from what I hear on my end, it sounds like you covered it pretty well. So yeah. Colorado is with the mule deer is a draw only. Like you have to draw a tag, right?
Yep. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are units you can draw without points. I'm actually pretty sure she drew that tag our first year out here without any points. Neither of us have drawn it since without points. It's usually taken us 1 point to get that tag.
Okay. So how many rifle seasons do you have out there?
So we've got 4 rifle seasons. And I'd have to look at the regulation brochure because it gets a little funky unit to unit.
Okay.
I know, which there we go. I'll just drop it anyway, or you can bleep it out, whichever. It doesn't matter. It's a fun unit. It's a hard unit. It's a good unit if you're willing to put in the work and put up with the pressure. But I know, well, I don't want to say I know, but pulling from memory, I don't think deer have a first or a fourth season in this unit. And again, that's pulling from memory. I'm sure we can look at the regulation brochure at some point and we can tell me I'm wrong, but pulling from memory, you got second and third season for deer in that specific unit.
Okay.
And so I put in for second season tag as she did. And this year, it was 2022, I drew it. And it was quite the opposite of the warm kind of, I think we were getting 25 degrees in the morning and close to 70 through the day for her 2021 tag. And this year we were socked in with snow in 2022. The first area I had gone, I was going through knee deep snow and just kind of post holing around. The wind was bitter. I even threw a blanket in my pack for that opening day to, cover up so I could sit there and burn glass without having to post hole through snow.
So yeah, they're going to see on the cover picture that obviously we know that we're talking because you shot your buck, so that's not a surprise. It's not a spoiler there. But on the cover picture for this episode, you're going to see that he's sitting in snow there, which is definitely a stark contrast to you guys' first year. So the 2021 year, that was your guys' first year in Colorado, right? Or the first year you guys?
It was our first residency season. So we had got out here June of, end of May, beginning of June 2020.
Okay.
And we didn't qualify for residency until that following January.
Okay.
So.
All right. Yep. I got you. Okay. So this is your second full year of residency with them then, huh?
Yep. That was our second full year. And as I said, that first day was just bitter cold. The wind was howling. May have been a rookie mistake, but it was an area we'd found some deer sheds and had deer activity going on in the year prior. It was not the spot we were hunting for her tag, but it was close to the house and it was opening day. I knew nobody would be in there. So I hiked in, set up, and probably made the rookie mistake of choosing a north-facing slope on a bitter cold day. Sat there for as long as I could, freezing, not seeing anything moving. Hiked my way to what I thought was going to be close to the top of the mountain, and it was not. to try and drop over the south side of it. And the snow was just too deep, and maybe I'm just too out of shape. But I called it for the day and went home to lick my wounds. Looking forward to the next day to returning to the spot we had some history with the year prior.
Yeah, I had enough trouble getting up and down the mountain without snow. I can imagine what it's like with knee-deep snow trying to get up and down. So I don't blame you for calling it a quit, especially sitting on the north face for that long with the bitter wind. So yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, and a stark contrast from the snow here to the snow in the Midwest and Ohio is we call it powder because it's not slushy mess, and it's very fine snow and very slick snow. So it's not like mucking through slush and your pants are soaked up to your kneecaps by the first hour walking through it. It's a very dry, dusty snow, and it's it's a very it's a very different feel, especially coming from back east.
Yeah, I'm good.
But so anyway, the next day we get up. The wife had the weekend off and was eager to come with me, so we packed up together, loaded the truck, and headed to the destination. We get there, and there was not, as a surprise to the following year, we're on the weekend, and we hike in, we set up, and there's not a soul around, which surprised me. When you get kind of inclement weather, it kind of gets people fired up to get chasing deer and elk and everything else that's in season at the time. And for there to be no one else on the hill was shocking,
Maybe they
but
knew something you
exciting
didn't.
too.
Maybe they knew something you didn't.
Maybe, but maybe not. So we had hiked into a location on this in this area, and we were facing east, which was a benefit because it was again 20 degrees this morning, but less wind. So we had been in a position for the sun to rise on us and kind of warm us up, so we didn't have to pack up as early. So we had sat down in the dark, got ready, watched the sun rise, and looked around for deer to be moving down in the sage flat below us. And now I knew if we did see a deer that I was going to have to make a play on it from that position because there wasn't really any open shots until about 300 yards. So in my mind, it was going to be if we see a deer, she was going to hang out, watch the deer, and I was going to move in. Her signal to me, if the deer had disappeared or left the area, was to hang her pink coat, as high as I could see it, or to indicate the deer was gone. But we really didn't see much. We sat there until about 9 a.m. Two other hunters at some point did pop over the ridge, and we saw one 4x4 deer, and which was encouraging. And he disappeared kind of to the northwest behind us into a big aspen bowl. And I looked at Emily and I said, if we don't see anything by 9:30, we'll get up. We'll go up the rest of this western facing or eastern facing slope and get to the flat and kind of drop into that aspen bowl to see if we can pick up that 4x4 again. So we're sitting there, and time passes, and it's 9:30, and we get up and start making our venture through the snow. Being on that east kind of, we were sitting east facing, and the rest of the slope kind of faced south. So the snow wasn't too thick, not as thick as the day before, and we went up to the next stage flat above us. Nothing was hanging out in there, so we decided to drop into the aspen bowl. And in this bowl, it gets pretty thick in most of the spots, but you do get openings where you can see some movement if there is movement, and you can kind of pull your binoculars up and go through the thickets. So as we move back down the hill in this bowl, kind of moving to the northeast now, we aren't seeing much sign. We're not seeing any tracks. There's a lot more snow on this side. Just started to kind of get a little discouraged. Now it's day 2. There's not a lot to get discouraged about, but it's cold and you're tired getting up early and trudging through that stuff. But as we meandered down the slope, eventually we come across a spot, and I'd say it was probably 120 yards. We saw something get up. I pulled my binoculars up, and sure enough, it's a deer. Um, couldn't tell if it was a buck or a doe. Its head was behind an aspen tree, and being a buck only tag and not either sex tag, it wasn't worth the risk of pulling up the gun and taking a shot. You need to know what you're shooting at. Just because you think it's a buck doesn't mean it is. ID what you're shooting at, people.
Amen.
So I got the binoculars up.
Hold on,
Sorry, go ahead.
Let me interrupt. Especially you guys, you muzzleloaders who are hunting during the archery season, ID your target, because I don't want to have to wear a hunter's orange in Colorado during archery season. The end.
Yeah, and just in general,
Yeah.
If you're behind the trigger of anything, you do not point your gun at a target that you don't know.
That you don't positively know. Like, don't shoot at noise and don't shoot at movement. Yeah. Use that to get your attention and then verify what it is. Because I tell, like, I just had Creston out hunting, and I said, don't actually look for deer because you'll never see them. Look for movement. Once you see the movement, and then focus in, and then the deer will materialize itself.
Yep.
That's the same to anybody. Like, you hear that a lot with turkey hunters on public land as well. Like people just get excited. They hear something that sounds like a turkey and a little rustling in a bush, and they shoot, and it's another hunter that's calling, right? Yeah. So guys, gals, like, please positively identify what you are pulling the trigger on. And I'm going to go one step above that. Positively identify what you are pointing your weapon of choice at.
Yep. Like Uncle Ben taught us, with great power comes great responsibility. And this applies here.
Good old Uncle Ben. God rest his soul.
But yeah, I mean, it's very important, and you learn it in your hunter safety courses. You only have to take that course once. Don't forget what you learned, because it's very important.
Yes, it is. Very, very important.
So, without me being able to ID this deer, no deer is going down. Had it been either sex tag, okay, it's clearly a deer, and for a first deer, it wouldn't have mattered. But having the buck only tag, it's not worth going under investigation, having to pay fines for take of the wrong sex of the species.
Which that's an interesting. That brings me to a question. Since it's a buck only tag, what is a legal deer then?
So, from what I've heard, there used to be other stipulations, but where it's at right now is 5-inch spikes are a legal take.
Okay, because I know here.
And so, if you're really good at measuring, and you're not very good at measuring, and you're not sure if those spikes are 5 inches, I'd probably hold off on that too. Not saying don't shoot a spike. I'm saying cover your bases.
Yeah, I know some people, like, they give little tips on how to, like, accurately field judge or be close to it. Like, your typical deer ear is like X amount of inches. I don't know what that number is, and I definitely don't know what the typical mule deer ear length is. But they'll tell you, like, once you know that, and then you compare that to the antler, that should give you a pretty good estimate of what it is.
Well, and I can say in the moment, they all look bigger than they are.
Don't they?
So prepare yourself for potential ground shrinkage too.
Good old ground shrinkage. All right, so yeah, but here in Ohio, which is that's kind of close to what we do, because in Ohio it's 3 inches or more is an antlered deer, and it's not that because most of our tags, actually the majority of our tags, are either sex tags, and they just started several years ago, which I think of several years ago. I don't know, time flies for me, where you have just the antlers only, or the deer management permit, as we call them, which you can only shoot an antlerless deer with that, which is any deer that has antlers, or that could have antlers that is less than 3 inches. So, okay. It could be a doe, it could be a spike, it could be a button buck, but the antlers can't be any more than 3 inches. So for you guys, for it to be legal on a buck only tag, the spikes have to be at least 5 inches long.
At the minimum, yeah.
Okay. Right, that makes sense.
Yep. So we're staring at this deer. Emily's behind me about 20 yards. She couldn't really pick it out because of the way the trees were set up. I just had an opening where I could see it. I tried getting a range on it just to have a general idea in case it did step around that tree, and it was just thick enough I couldn't even get a range on it with the range finder. So we made the decision to slowly creep in, and as we're moving in, the scenery shifts a different direction, and you tend to lose the game that you were looking at. So we moved in about another 40, 50 yards, and all of a sudden, I don't see it anywhere. She doesn't see it anywhere. And if anybody's going to pick anything out in the woods, it's going to be her. She's got an eagle eye when we're going through that stuff, and she's not even picking it up. So I kind of lost hope in the fact that, all right, we spooked it. It turned and ran down the mountainside and is out of the question. So we kind of hang our heads and keep slowly moving along just in case something else is around. And holy crap, there's this deer again, standing on the hill, broadside, just kind of frozen in his tracks as we are. Slowly pull the binoculars out, and I was able to ID one spike on, I guess it'd be the left side of its head, and it was well over 5 inches. I'm not a super good judge at such distances, but you could tell that this spike was within legal range. So I got the rangefinder out. For some reason, again, it wasn't giving me an indicator, but I estimate it between 70 and 80 yards. So very doable shot at that distance, again, using the 350 Legends. We stand there and I try and wrestle my bipod out of my pack, and it is just not working. It's not coming out of the side of my pack. It's hanging up. And I don't know why I didn't abort the mission for the bipod, but in my mind, it was set. I'm using the bipod. That's all there is. And for some reason, this deer just watches me fish around for it. So we eventually get the bipod out, stand the legs up, lay the gun down, and put it just behind the front shoulder, let the shot rip. And Emily's being the best spotter that anybody could ask for. I could see through the scope after I had pulled the trigger. The deer got hit for sure, the way it acted, its demeanor, the way it took off. And fortunately, she had seen where the deer had gone. Now, granted, it didn't go far, but it was thick enough that once I pulled my head away from the scope, I was having trouble picking it back up. She said it went, maybe 20, 30 yards from where I'd shot it, and she saw it fall over behind a log. So on the general safe side, I've gone in on deer too soon and had them get away because of a poor shot. I had confidence in this shot, but I also didn't want to push this deer farther than I needed to. So we gave it about 20 minutes, and I had a little bit of cell service when we're standing there and, excited, thrilled. I started sending out the text that I had potentially just knocked down my first mule deer, and you were the first person I sent one of those messages to.
I think I remember getting this text. I'm like, ooh. I'm like, oh, so I'm like excited for you. Yeah, you were talking about that wait period. Like I try to give them at least 30 minutes. If I didn't see them fall down, and I know it was a good, like I could tell it was a good shot. But I'm talking bow hunting though. I'm not talking rifle. But I usually give them at least that 30-minute window. So yeah, 20 minutes is definitely a reasonable time. But yeah, I do remember getting that text. I was like, I know I'm not excited as you or Emily would have been, but I've got to be darn near close with the excitement for you. So yeah, go on, man.
So, we're excited that it's a lot to soak in for, our first Western big game to potentially hit the ground. I mean, it did hit the ground, but we didn't want to count our chickens before they hatched. So we gave it that 20 minutes, and I'm still asking Emily because I'm just a nervous wreck, where exactly was it you saw him fall? And she's describing it, and so I'm looking, and about that 20-minute mark, man, you just started seeing snow flying from that final death kick. And we knew it was over after he had done that. So she stood where the shot was taken from and kind of guided me towards the deer. Now, there was a lot of snow on the ground, and there probably would have been a good enough blood trail. We could have went over to where I had shot and trailed it up in. But I felt like since we knew where it was laying, she could stay there and just guide me into where the deer was. And it felt like an eternity getting over there because you're post holing through knee deep snow again on the backside of this mountain, and you just wanting to see that end result. Um, After asking her a million times, how much farther do I need? Uh, and her probably getting annoyed with it. I finally had made it, and then she scurried over, following my boot tracks over to where we had found the deer resting. And I can't say for sure, but there's a part of me that believes this was the cactus buck we had seen the year before. I don't know how common it is, but man, that 21 buck had a lot of relative characteristics that, at least on the right side, that I could see um, from the buck the year prior. I'm not going to say it's the same deer, but I have a lot of confidence that it's the same deer.
Yeah, I'm glad you covered that because that was going to be a question I had for you after you mentioned seeing that cactus buck, a cactus buck the previous year. I'm like, well, I wonder if that was the same deer then. So, and that's
Sorry, I still wonder, but there's a piece of me that just feels like I know.
yeah, I wonder what the prevalence rate of that is. And that'd be a good question to ask, like a biologist, a deer biologist. Like, how often does that happen? Like I understand there's a lot of variables that go into that. Like, because as you said, like there's got to be something that's going to cause like a lower testosterone, or even possibly even being like a antlered doe too. But
Yeah.
that lower testosterone. Hold on a minute, because my stupid dog is caught up in my power cord. Hold on. Okay. So, anyways,
All right.
that was interesting. So, like I was saying, so that'd be a good question for biologists because you're looking to see what the prevalence rate of that would be, and I was in contact with a biologist there in Colorado there when I first started to go there. His name was, what was it? Clay something. Really cool dude. Like, and I've tried to stay in touch with him, but he hasn't responded back to my emails recently. I don't know if he got tired of talking to me or if he got promoted or no longer with the Parks and Wildlife. But yeah, that would be interesting to know what the prevalence rate of a quote unquote cactus buck is. Because as you kind of mentioned, like it's got to be something like either they got their nuts chopped off, or they received some type of damage to their testicles, something that's causing that low T to where the antler growth isn't spurred by the hormones like it should be, along with the hormones spiking to tell them to tell them to get the velvet off. And like I said, I think that's also the same case that you run across with antlered does as well. So,
yeah, I believe with the antler does, they just have a higher T count, testosterone levels than they normally would.
right.
But with this guy, getting up to him and getting hands on him, and just number one, the sheer awe of my first mule deer, but also my first buck in velvet, and it's the end of October. What are you doing, guy? Like that should be on.
Right.
But he's a freak. He's a once in a lifetime deer, at least in my eyes, and it's always going to be a memorable hunt. But upon getting over all of that, it's time to get to work and decide: are we going to try and gut him and drag him out? Are we going to quarter him up? What are we going to do? So
yeah, before we get too far along in this, like seriously, tell me what is really going through your mind as you're walking up on this, like because there's a lot of hard work. Like this is like year 2 of hard work that went into this. Like seriously, what are you feeling? What's going through your mind?
just I don't know, pure elation, I guess. After our first elk hunt in 2018, I didn't expect to put an animal on the ground, and we had a lot of, at least in my mind, for a first time elk hunter, I would consider success, even just hearing elk bugle and being in them. And then, that 21 season, I had an archery tag. I didn't get to hunt it as long as I would have liked to. And I'd put in a lot of work that year to try and find elk and get on elk, and just didn't pan out there either. And then we had her tag. that came close, but almost tasted success and just didn't get there either. Then again, in 2022, I decided to opt out of the archery tag and put in for an early season rifle bear tag. Put in a lot of work to running cameras and finding bear sign and getting pictures of bear. Again, was didn't get as much time to hunt that, and still didn't even come close. I watched the gritty guys a lot, and their biggest thing with bear hunting is most of the bear hunting isn't seeing bears, and boy did I find that out. And so, after seemingly a lot of miles over the last several years there, we finally were able to put our first Colorado big game animal on the ground in year 2 rifle season of being residents. And so it was just pure elation to finally see something finally come together.
Dude, and I'm happy for you for that, because I know the work that you guys have put into it. Because when you first moved out there, you weren't considered residents, so you really didn't get into the big game portion of it. If I remember correctly, you did end up getting a small game license, like when you
Yep.
could, but you didn't get into the big game until after you guys became residents. Because let's be honest, a non-resident tag in Colorado is expensive, and
Yep.
there are other places that are pricier. So for all you haters out there, it's going to say, "We need to quit whining. It's not as expensive as such and such state." You're right. It's not. But the difference between a non-resident and a resident tag is astronomical. You're paying 300 to 500% more for a non-resident tag as you would a resident tag, if not more. Like that's like
Yeah.
ballparking. So yeah, I could see why you guys held off on the whole big game until you guys became residents.
And I'm not saying, it's not fair, but I'm also not saying it's fair. But, that's kind of the way it is. If you are out of state, it is pay to play. The animals of the state belong to the people of the state. So keep that in mind when you're clicking that button for your next out of state hunt. Why is it so expensive? Well, I mean, if you don't like it, move.
Please come to Colorado. Actually, I heard Idaho is the place to go right now. So,
I don't know. They're all great.
anyways, no, I don't complain about the price. I understand the kind of the let me rephrase that. Like, I don't complain about the price until I'm frustrated, and I complain about the price.
Yeah. I'll complain, when I was a non-resident, I'm like, man, that's a lot of money. And it is, but for the experience and a lot of what you get to take in, it's not, I could come back to Ohio and pay non-residents fees to hunt whitetail, and it would cost the same if I still lived in Ohio and came to Colorado to hunt mule deer as non-residents. It's around $350. So,
Yeah.
Choose your poison, where you live, I guess, depending on what you want to do. When we ended up moving, it was kind of blindsided us because we didn't have plans to move here. It just kind of happened. So we're fortunate, but I still would have probably every 5 years would have saved that money and come elk hunting with you.
Hey, listen, I'd gladly had you with us for those elk hunts. So so you are uber excited that you got your first big game animal down in Colorado. I'm like excited because I got the text and I know that you got a big game animal down. And so tell me what was the pack out like?
Well, that was the determination. So we're sitting here just reveling in our success and kind of feeling the velvet. We were only about a mile and a half from the truck at this point, and oddly enough 90 yards to the northwest of where we had sat that morning. So this deer had been bedded up right behind us the entirety of the morning, and we had no idea. But the biggest thing was, I could drag this deer out. I've done farther drags with whitetail, but having the velvet on and knowing how velvet is in early season for deer when they're growing the antler, I wasn't sure if it was going to peel off. So I made the decision that we were going to quarter the deer up and head out. So I was in a bit of a dilemma, though, because here you're also required, if you don't leave the head attached to the carcass and drag it out, you're required to have evidence of sex. And usually with a male specimen, that's a testicle still attached to one of the quarters. Well, we're in a dilemma because Mr. Cactus Buck doesn't have any testicles.
Oh, it explains why he's a cactus buck.
Yep. And I don't know if they got torn off. That didn't look like any scarring around that region. So
I don't want to be
it's only left to speculate.
right. I don't want to be crude on this because some people are going, well, then it was an antlered doe. He had a penis though, right?
Yeah, there was definitely a penis, and wasn't quite sure how to leave that attached. So I took a photograph of the genital region, to put it lightly, and just to have in the chance that I had been stopped, and questioned. So anyway, once we got past scratching our head on that part, I had actually gutted the deer just so my wife could experience what field dressing looked like, and to her disdain, smelled like. Once that heat came out of the body cavity, she was not a big fan.
I bet.
I think from here on out, for her, she would prefer it to just be quartered, the gutless method. So anyway, we gutted it, kind of stared at it for a minute, and I made the ultimate decision that no, we're just gonna zipper the pelt off the back and start quartering this deer up. And I have probably the best wife in the world. I don't know how yours is, but I know mine is fantastic. And I gave her all the extra stuff that was in my pack, and she was a trooper. I asked her if she was confident enough to hike back to the truck herself and just drop that extra stuff off. I said, don't feel like you have to come back up. I'll get this deer out one way or the other. And so she started back to the truck as I started getting the rest of the deer broke down. She took it all down, and I got the deer loaded in my pack, and began over the hill. And thankfully, she was on her way back, because I needed that trekking pole she had, and we only had one with us. At this point in the day, it had warmed up to about 35, 40 degrees. The snow was melting on that southeast facing slope, catching all that sun and just turning to sheer mud. And I had about 110, 120 pounds on my back. All four quarters, back straps, loin meat, all the meat I could get off this deer, plus the head.
Nice.
And so it didn't feel great, and that's probably one of the dumber things I've done. I probably should have left half of it up there, because it was only a mile and a half, but 110, 120 pounds that far in that slimy mud it's too much.
Yeah, I hear
But
you.
fortunately, she was on her way back up. We met about halfway, and I was able to grab that from her and made the trek back to the truck, and the rest is history.
Well, dude, that is awesome. But I'm going to cycle back to, first off, thank you for putting me on the hot seat about asking me about how my wife was when it came to this type of stuff. Thank you. I appreciate that. Like you definitely broke the bro code on that one for calling somebody out on that. And I'm going to go on record and say my wife is amazing. And I think she would have tried her best to help. But I've had her on down at the Hocking Hills without packing anything, and I darn near killed her there. But I know she would have tried to help and put her best foot forward, and I think she would have managed and would have succeeded because she's very stubborn, and one of the reasons I love her is because how stubborn she is, and so I think she would have been beneficial in the same case, but she definitely would have wished that her bestie Emmy would have been with her to help her with that. So
for sure. Well, to be fair, had you not circled back to it, I don't even think she would have realized I said it.
No, probably not. But I'm not going to leave chance to play that one out without me because even though if we're going to statistically try to come up with the probability of her actually catching that beforehand, she probably wouldn't have. But this will probably be the one time that she did catch it, and then it would be brought to my attention multiple times that I didn't say anything about that. So I am going to say,
had she been there, I'm sure she'd have done the same for you.
She'd have done the same thing, or at least tried, and didn't put her best foot forward in that one.
Or at the minimum, strapped everything on you and rolled you down the hill.
One or the other. One or the other. She'd either been like my biggest fan and encouraging me to do my very best, or she would have, or she would have strapped up, whatever extra stuff I had on me and moved on. So yeah, but look at you, 110 pounds of freaking grade A, 100% natural deer meat, which I think that's a fair assessment because your mule deer, mule deer could be somewhere between 200 to 300 pounds. I'm assuming. I think they could probably get a little bit bigger than that, but you're looking about a third of what you're going to actually like carry out meat wise. And that's not even, and folks, when I say that, a third of what you're going to carry out. So if you shoot a 300-pound animal, you could probably look at walking away or packing out 100 pounds of meat. Now, let's go one step more on that. That's not usable meat. Like you're going to have a little bit of like loss because
a lot of trim.
Yeah, you're going to have some trim in that. So for you guys and gals who take your meat to a processor after, shooting the deer, especially in that case, like because I hear a lot of stories or a lot of, not stories, but I hear a lot of people complain, ooh, I only ended up with X amount of meat and I turned in like way more than that. I think they're taking meat from me. No, they're not. It's just that's not like some of the stuff they have to trim off is not usable stuff. Like you don't want it. It's either because it's been crusted over, or it's a lot of silver skin, or several other things like tendons,
or poor meat care.
Or just
you run into
yeah.
folks who don't pay attention to where hair's getting if you're Western hunting. When you quarter a deer out, I believe go with the grain of the hair. Start at the back of the neck and work towards the butt. I made the mistake of going from the butt and working towards the neck, and it was like giving that thing a haircut all the way up the back. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
But I got back to my roots. The last few years I had hunted in Ohio, I'd been taking deer to a processor, but that was because I didn't have the facilities to do it myself. I didn't have anywhere to process the deer, hang the deer, any of that. With this deer being quartered out and me finally being a homeowner, I was able to bring the deer home and finally get back to my roots of my younger days and cut the thing up myself. So,
well, let me add a caveat to that. A homeowner who has a wife who's also a hunter who also would do the same thing.
Yep.
Because I guarantee you, a partner who was not on board with that, that meat would have never seen the kitchen until it was packaged and sealed, or and frozen probably. So yeah, that's let me go ahead and say it. Like I don't process my own deer. Like I take it to a processor, and first and foremost, because although I have my own house, and technically, if I wanted to drop the money into it, I could have my space to do it. I just don't want to. Because I know I'm not going to be able to do it in the kitchen because it's going to be a mess, and I do not want to burden my wife with that.
And it's cold out in the hangar, and nobody wants to be cold,
right? And like for the most part in Ohio, like I pay, it's gone up a little bit. The guy I go to, but I pay less than $100 for them to process a deer. Like I'm good with that, right? So I've got
absolutely what you get. And where you get it and who you get it from is 100% worth the price. Mm-hmm. He's a great guy. Another reason, aside from me just wanting to do it myself with this guy, I'm not familiar with any of the processors out here, and I'm just also kind of not comfortable with not knowing their process of processing.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. That's really fair. And don't get me wrong. I've kicked the idea around of maybe I should learn to do this myself because it doesn't look to be overly that complicated. But once again, it's just kind of like a just having a space to do it.
If I'm doing it, it's not that complicated.
Yeah, but well, I mean, you showed me pictures. You kind of like were showing me pictures of your journey through that. So, I mean, you look like you did a really good job. I mean, I haven't been through school for butchering, so I couldn't like sit there and like give you the Gordon Ramsay route. But it looked like you did a good job. I mean, it was edible. You ate it. You enjoyed it. So, what else can I say?
That's all. Another, which I guess before we get too far away from it, another fun topic. I did get the head to a taxidermist. I did not do this deer skull myself. mostly because of the velvet. Otherwise, I would have boiled the skull and attempted to Euro mount it myself. But with the velvet, we went the taxidermist route, and I did learn a lot from him, explaining the process and why the cost was going to be the cost, because I guess velvet's just a bitch to work with. So he did inform me on a lot of the process for that. And once I picked the head up, they informed me, as my thought was after seeing the deer's teeth, that this was quite a bit older of a deer. And so I got the benefit to shoot a very old, mature buck, but I also got the benefit of his meat not being super, as people would say, gamey or rutted up, because there wasn't a rut going through him. He did not rut, and he was a fat, fatty deer. So I got to shoot a buck and have relatively doe meat.
So that brings up a good discussion point about this, because and I'm not saying this like as an offensive way. The deer would not be considered like to someone trying to enter him into a Boone and Crockett or one of those record books as a trophy deer, right? Now, like I said, because he's not a 180 inch mule deer, right?
Oh, he might not even be 120.
Right. But I say that because it's a trophy to you, right? And
100%.
And it's not like, don't think that size has to be everything. If that's what you're into, fine. Like I'm good with that, right? Because there's pros and cons behind each one of these types of approaches. But like, here you are, right? This is your first deer. Because I think, didn't you have a couple arguments with some people like on Instagram about the size of the deer, and they were giving you, am I wrong there?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Nobody gave me flack about anything. Everyone was super supportive, and thrilled for the experience that I was able to have.
Okay.
But you do get those people. With this being a cactus buck, you're probably not going to get a lot of flack for it, because it is what it is.
Right. Yeah.
But my goal going into this, it was my first mule deer hunt ever outside of experiencing the one my wife had, which was her hunt.
Right.
So this was my first mule deer hunt, and in my mind, whatever was legal was going to hit the ground. It didn't matter if it was a spike, a forkhorn, or a 400-inch mythical timber buck. But, in my mind, I wanted meat in the freezer. I had enough tag soup over the last year and a half in that experience. It's just, it's a lot. It's a lot to get your first Western big game animal on the ground, especially when you're fairly new to it. You're used to whitetail hunting, and you're hunting a specific way for a species that you can put a specific pattern on for the most part. But these deer, they move around a lot, so you never know what's going to be in the area day to day. And it's a different experience, with their behavior as they move into rut as well.
Yeah,
and they're public land deer.
And they're public land, but that's you're absolutely right with that. And once again, like when I said that about record books, things like that, like that's not I wasn't. Hopefully that didn't come off the wrong way, and hopefully people listening didn't take that the wrong way, because I'm definitely not forcing people to be trophy hunters. Like, that's not the point behind hunting. Like, you need to chase your own experience when it comes to hunting and find what sets your heart on fire when it comes to this. And just listening to you tell the story, and and I understand that this was we're going on a year since this had actually happened, but you can still tell in your voice, you're telling it like this is still like an important milestone in your life, and like this deer meant a lot to you. And also, like, I could tell from the text you said that this deer meant a lot to you. And I say that for everyone listening, like even if Sam, like I'm sorry, I thought maybe we had a discussion that somebody had made some stupid comment to you about the deer. I thought we had that conversation, but apparently I imagined it. So I'm glad, first off, I'm glad you didn't have to experience that. But I want to preface to say this, like even if you had gone through that, shame on that person for doing that. right?
Yeah.
Shame on you for doing that. And like, you chase the experience that you want, and then you let Sam chase or anybody chase the experience that they want, because they,
Yep.
and don't try to force your experience on the next person, because why ruin such a good thing for somebody? Like,
Absolutely.
you know,
Just a lot of people don't take into account, there are guys that are fortunate to get out there and hunt all 30 days of archery season, whether they need them or not. They have that ability, or they have the ability to hunt the 2 weeks of that rifle tag or full week. You got to remember, it's a tough world out there. Prices of things aren't getting any cheaper. People have tough jobs, and that job may only allot a couple days a year to get out. And like you said, shame on you for shaming someone for the experience that they have and that they're proud of. And it makes me sad when I see posts online of guys saying, "Well, it's not the biggest." It
oh,
like it doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter.
you know,
Like
I've had,
it saddens my soul that we've become such a community of people where we have in a sense a standard of where you should be in life, and we're basing it off of antler size.
and I'm glad you said that because it also reminds me of the ones that, well, it was just a doe. I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean just a doe? Like, is her life not as valuable as the life as the trophy buck? I mean,
Right? Is that meat not gonna be sustenance for your family just the same?
and I understand that's coming from a place of like a fear of being shamed. Like, brother, sister, I'm not going to shame you for shooting a doe. Like, it's
No,
legal.
but I am gonna shame you for shaming everyone else.
Yeah, if you're going to shame somebody else for doing it, I'm going to shame you just as hard as you're shaming that person, because it doesn't belong there. Now, I will tell you, if you illegally take an animal, I'm going to shame. I don't care what size animal it is, or how happy you were about getting it. If you did something illegal or immoral, I'm going to shame you for it, because you
Absolutely.
deserve it. But outside of that, like, if you played by the rules and you got the experience that you wanted, right? That's yours. And I'm gonna also tell everyone this, like, even if people are trying to shame you, don't let them get to you, because sometimes that's jealousy. Sometimes it's that's coming from a place that's not jealousy, but something that's darker and deeper and more ugly than that. Don't let them, because that's you. And the only thing you control is how you respond to those things. That was your experience.
Absolutely.
You won. You got what you wanted, and be proud of it and be happy. And like, I understand where you're coming from, where you say, well, he wasn't the biggest thing. Okay, fine. I get it. But let me preface, let me say this. If you are ashamed, if you personally are ashamed because you shot that animal, right? Then maybe you didn't get the experience, or didn't hold yourself to the experience that you wanted, right? And I'm not mad at you because you shot an animal. Like, good, I'm happy for you, right? But at the same time, like, if it wasn't what you wanted to shoot, then why did you shoot it?
Yeah. Yep. It's like I can't remember who said it. I've heard it said a lot in the past few years, but never pass on the first day what you'd be happy to have on the last day.
I have
I
heard that.
like that because I'm the person, if I pass on something, I'm going to be eating tag soup and a bowl of tears.
Yeah, I'm with you, and that was my mission this year. Bow hunting, like, don't pass something that you would shoot on the last day. But luckily, it kind of worked out for me when it came to whitetail hunting here in Ohio. So
Yeah, I mean,
so
you
before
got.
what? Go ahead.
Sorry, go. Nope, I was gonna say you were extremely fortunate to take a great animal. So
Well, a lot of that was also a lot of patience, and just being confident that at some point I'm going to get an opportunity at something. And once again, that's not because I have, okay, I do have a standard that I'm looking for, and not because I'm above it, but I've progressed through my hunting career, or when I say hunting career, I mean as a hunter, that I have shot many of smaller deer. I've shot a lot of medium deer, and I'm not really looking to go into the record books, but I have an idea of, like, when I look at a buck, I want to go, yep, and then we'll go from there. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a 120 or a 180 or a 235. If I see it and I go, yep, I'm probably going to shoot it if I get the opportunity. And that's just how I've progressed in my career. And I think that's how a lot of people do. Like, I've been very blessed to have some great friends with some great properties that I can hunt, and I've had a lot of great opportunities. Some I've capitalized on, some I have not. And and I don't. And just because I pass on smaller deer that I'm not ready to shoot doesn't mean that the next person should. Like if that sets your heart on fire and that is the experience that you want, then my friend, be my guest, smoke the deer.
Absolutely.
Smoke that deer.
Absolutely. And if I still lived in Ohio and had the luxury of multiple deer tags a season, you know, I it wouldn't matter to me if I filled all those tags with doe. I'd be even just one of them. Just to have meat in the freezer puts a smile on my face.
Oh, I'm a doe slayer. I am a doe slayer. I have
Yeah.
I have no
We're gonna have
problem
to get
shooting
together
doe.
one of these days and go through some of your experiences with the doe, and then maybe talk about the pants down buck.
Well, that is on the agenda at some point in time that we will have to talk about. The patch down buck is the clean version of of what was going on, and no, it wasn't X rated. But so get your mind out of the gutter that way. But anyways, so before we close this out, I do have a couple follow-up questions for you. And so I'm going to go back to like how vital partner communication was. And I'm not saying partner because of wife and husband and wife, not that type of partnership, which it happened to be in this one, but just hunting with a partner in those communications. Like, so you had mentioned that, an indicator that she was supposed to give you if the deer had completely left the area was for her to take her pink coat and fly it as high as she could. So, how'd you guys work out these communications? What was your game plan? Walk us through it a little bit.
Big thing I had learned, you listen to all the podcasts you can and you try and absorb information, especially when you're new to a subject. And one of the biggest proponents that I love listening to and couldn't praise enough is the information that Remy Warren puts out there. And one of the episodes he had, and I think it was before the Live Wild podcast. I can't remember the name of the previous one,
It was
but
Cutting the
he had
Distance.
an episode on hunting with a partner,
Mhm.
and it was all like most of it was about being keyed in on your communication, because if you have something in your mind and your partner, whoever it may be, has something else in their mind and they signal something to you that you don't understand, it's not going to work.
Right.
And so before any hunt, whether it's for the day or for that specific season, my wife and I have a discussion of what signals should be, could be, and how we are going to use those signals. And it's just simple communication, and sometimes it's in a long range form.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that. So by the way, the podcast name was Cutting the Distance.
Yeah, that was it.
Yep, it was the one that he. I think that's is that a Meat Eater podcast? One of their brands.
Yeah, I think Phelps took that over.
Yeah,
now.
and then because I actually was like following that podcast, and then I listened to the last episode, and Remy announced that Jason Phelps was going to take over that podcast. I've listened to it a few times since Jason's taken off, but I've definitely followed Remy over to his Live Wild podcast. That dude's just a killer.
And a wealth of knowledge.
And he's humble though. Like I really appreciate like his approach to the topic, and that the tactics and stuff that he gives. And he's definitely an icon in this arena.
Absolutely. Just staying on track with whoever you're hunting with. I know when you were out for archery season, in the morning when we get up, we would discuss the game plan. If it was lunch and we had a new game plan, we would discuss the game plan. Because without that breakdown of the morning or the entirety of the day, whichever form you're hunting in, if you're going for all day sits or long all day spot and stock, you need to be on the same page. And whether it's meeting points if you're separating, or hand signals if you have a spotter, it makes life much easier when you have that cohesiveness between each other and the communication doesn't fall apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good, even if you have a daily briefing, to remind everybody, especially when it comes to those communications. Whether the briefing is before you go out for the day, or the briefing is before you separate. You kind of go over and you just to reiterate what everyone's supposed to do. I think people undervalue having those types of briefings with each other.
They do, because my first archery elk season out here, kind of by myself. I had met someone and had been hunting with them. At some point through the hunt, the communication had broke down, and it kind of made for a difficult time.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that it happens, but
it happens, and that's part of life, and you overcome and find new ways to go about things.
Or new partners, one of the two.
Absolutely.
All right. So in the last follow-up question I have for you is what? So you said you're shooting a 350 Legend, and yes, sir. So what rifle is it?
So I shoot a 22-inch barrel. It's the threaded barrel Ruger American Predator. I didn't choose it because it had a threaded barrel. I just like the longer barrel format for that caliber. I don't know why. I don't know if it was an aesthetic thing. It definitely wasn't a research thing, because I just knew I wanted a 350 Legend. But I think it was more of an aesthetic thing versus I can't remember if it's the 16 or 18-inch ranch barrel. But I just wasn't a fan of that shorter barrel. And when I finally came across this 22-inch barrel, I had to have that specific Ruger American.
All right. What scope are you running?
I am running the Vortex Crossfire 3x9. Okay. So, being a 200-yard gun, you don't need all that extra fancy magnification where it's going to be super shaky when you're zoomed in all the way. And most of the time, I feel like, at least for whitetail hunting, when I had intended to use it, you're not even going to need half the magnification that you have in that.
Yeah. The way you have that kind of set up is you're kind of really in your sweet spot for your, what is they refer to, the MPBR, the maximum point blank range, to where like if you aim on the target, you are going to be no more than 4 inches higher or 4 inches low. Yep. So regardless of, even if you aim dead center, so your point of aim is always dead center of where you want to hit. And then it won't be any more than that. So you only have technically becomes like an 8 MOA area, or an 8-inch pie plate is what it becomes. So,
and with this caliber, it's a straight wall cartridge. It's not a flat shooting gun by any means. You have a lot of variation, from 100 to 300 yards. Mm-hmm. I have found with it that the 200-yard zero is the best, at least for me. Might be something else for someone else, but the 200-yard zero is perfect, because I don't have to aim that much higher at 250. And with that 70 to 80-yard shot I took, I put the crosshair where I wanted it and hit where I should have.
Yeah, so I don't know how many people know this, but at any given distance that you decide to zero, you're going to have a point where the bullet crosses that point of aim, point of impact is exactly the same, or what we call zero, twice in its flight path. It's going to be on its way up, and it's going to be back on its way back down. And so that's something to kind of look into. I'd be interested to see what that 200-yard zero, what those two crossing points are. Because
that would be a fun science project.
Yeah, it would be, because I know with the AR, I can't necessarily say the AR, because it depends. There's a lot of things that kind of go into it, like, the bullet grain weight, along with also the muzzle, or not muzzle, but the barrel length and stuff goes into this. But let's just say on general, I know the military likes like the 25-300. And then for law enforcement, we did the 50-200. So what we meant by that was we'd zero for 50 yards, and that meant that our bullet would also cross again at 200. And there's some other things that kind of go into that, but just know that generally, really as a rifle shooter, kind of look into that, because your bullet is going to cross that zero line at 2 points. As like I said, as it's on its way up, and then it's on its way back down.
Yeah. And another thing I'd like to touch on just real quick is ammunition selection. I chose the Hornady American Whitetail. I can't remember if it's 170 or 175 grain. But they just, for me and my setup, they work perfectly. And every gun, you could have the same make and model that I have. and maybe your gun shoots the Winchesters better, or whatever manufacturer it may be. But mine really seems to like these Hornadies.
Yeah.
And so when you're running ammo selection, buy a few boxes, see what's going to pattern the best.
Yeah, and that's that is a good point that you bring up. And in my experience, unless there's a major issue, they'll at least hit what industry standard is, which is about 1 MOA, regardless of what you're using. But you're going to find something that shoots really, really good out of your gun. And
Yeah,
whether it's
a lot of the guys I talk to with rifles that hunt out here, they're not taking that gun out unless those rounds are touching.
Right, and I get that because you're talking distance, and I don't want to make this a very long discussion, but when you're talking MOA, you're talking minute of angle, and by angle, like at 100 yards, an MOA is 1 inch. It's a little bit more than that. I know people who are going to nerd out on this and tell me it's not really. It's like 1.047 inches. I get that, right? But it's an inch at 100. At 200. It's 2 inches. At 300, it's 3 inches. If you bring it back to 50 yards, right, it becomes a half an inch is what an MOA is. So what I'm telling you is that angle measurement, and for people, that makes more sense for people who are long distance shooters, that you want those bullets to be touching, especially at like 100 yards, because that's a sub MOA. So that when it gets to 5, 6, 700 yards, let's say that you're shooting a half MOA gun at 100 yards. That means you have a half-inch group at 100 yards. So you double that becomes 1 inch at 200, and then at 1.5 inches at 300, and then I want to go 2 inches at 400. So
and just continues up.
It just continues up. Like, it makes sense for them, right? And that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
if you can reduce your margin of error, and clearly, I mean, you have the science, you have the tools, you have the capability. Why not be as accurate as you can?
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, but some people, like, accuracy is very subjective, and it's based upon what the person's end goal is. A lot of hunters, and let's be real, guys and gals, you're happy if you can hit an 8-inch pie pan at any given distance. If you think about that, at 100 yards, that's an 8 MOA group, which is way outside of the industry standard of 1, right? But whatever, like, to each your own. I'm out on that discussion. Might be another podcast for another day. And we can argue that, but I'm just throwing that out there. So you're shooting them, the Ruger, the Ruger American is what you said?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ruger American, along with the Vortex Crossfire optic, and it appears it worked flawlessly for you.
Absolutely. And for the price point of the Ruger American, I have one in 308. I also have a Crossfire on it, but it's a 4x12 scope. Man,
that's
for
fair.
The price point of those guns, you're not going to get a better shooting gun, in my personal opinion.
Right. I would tend to agree. I would tend to agree with you on that. And really, and just to go back to what you said about trying different boxes of ammo, when you're trying this, also try different grain weights.
Yeah,
because
100%.
I'll tell you, most of the time, grain weight is going to be a correlation to your barrel twist, and that your barrel twist, and I'm going to go hypothetical here. Like, let's go back to ARs real quick. A 1 in 12 barrel, so a barrel twist. So that's one full rotation for 12 inches of barrel, is going to be able to stabilize the 55 grain bullet. All right. And like I said, this is hypothetical. So then let's jump up to the next popular size is like a 62 grain. That same 62 grain is not going to stabilize very well in that 1 in 12 twist. So you need to get a tighter twist, or a 1 in 10 or a 1 in 9. And then they can go up to about 90 grains, if not a little bit more, because I think some of the subsonic ones are a little bit heavier than that. So you need to get a faster twist weight. So what I'm telling you is that the higher your grain weight is, the likelihood you're going to need a faster twist rate for that caliber. But that's a lot of science. That's kind of nerdy for most of you. You might not need to go that deep. So
I was going to say, I'm just going to nod my head and agree. That's outside of my realm.
let me dumb it down. Get different grain weights, go shoot groups, and then find out which one works best for your gun. Yeah.
Man, yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to I work with a gentleman who absolutely nerds out on all that stuff, and he'd be perfect for that type of podcast if you ever want to put one out. But might be a little difficult getting him on. He's a bit busy with his 4 little rascals running around the house.
No, I get that, and I would love to have him on. And first and foremost, he's probably going to talk circles around me because I have some knowledge in it, but it's a working knowledge. Like, if somebody really nerds deep into it, they're going to blow me away, and I'd be happy to have somebody on to have that discussion with somebody.
The way you talk about arrows is what he gets into with rifles. So,
don't get me started. Don't get me started on arrows.
It would be an awesome experience for everyone.
All right. Well, Sammy, thank you so much for taking the time. You're kind of a co-host of this. You're kind of a co-host of this podcast, anyways. But I do appreciate you taking the time to kind of sit here and tell your story, not only your story, but also the story that kind of led into you going back to that area. And I got to agree. I bet you did shoot the same deer. I bet you did. I bet you that was the exact same deer you seen the year before.
In my heart of hearts, it says it is. And I appreciate you allowing me the platform to tell these stories and share these experiences. Because it just kind of helps us as hunters come together as a group. It's like sitting around a campfire talking to your buddies, in which, fortunately for us, we're buddies. So we just don't have the campfire. No. But no, I appreciate the platform, and I hope, I'll get a list of questions together one of these days, and maybe we can get some of your hunts thrown down.
Here's let me throw you a little tidbit. I basically just let the person start to tell the story, and then take notes, and then ask questions that
sounds way easier.
Yeah, because it's so hard to you think, and you had mentioned that before in a previous podcast. We'll let Sean prep some questions. I'm like, well, let's just wing it. And then I'll take notes as you're talking, and then I'll circle back to some points I want to cover on. So maybe that'll help you out. And I do want to get back on the mic, and discuss those, especially when we get towards the end, or let's reserve that for when I go pick that head up from Cunningham's when it's done. I would
absolutely.
That'd be a good time because I'd be late and I can actually look at the deer as I'm telling that story.
And that was the one thing I was doing pretty much this whole time. It was just staring at this deer and letting the memories kind of take over.
Well, dude, and thank you for your kind words about the platform and stuff, but this platform, if it grows, and I hope that it does, but it's going to take people that actually want to listen to it, and people that the people who are listening to it today. It's going to take you. It's going to take you to give us the likes, to give us the reviews, and the shares with your friends and your family. That's going to help this podcast grow. So if we are talking about stuff that you love, or even if you don't like it and you don't like it, but you see the point that we're making, share it, and maybe we can have an open, honest discussion, because too many times we spend too much time trying to be right instead of doing what is right. And that's having the open discussion, even if we got to learn something new. So once again, friend, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and share that story. Like my heart is full now. Just listen to that emotion that went through that story and stuff. Is there anything else you got to say in closing, my friend?
I don't. Get out there and chase your experience, guys. That's all there is to it.
Absolutely. Chase that experience. And with that said, folks, please, we hope you do go out there and chase that experience. And when you do, we hope you do it as safely as possible. And we definitely don't want to see you be shamed for you chasing the experience that you want. And if you are, let it slide off your back. I understand social media trolls can be very, very hurtful, but listen, you control how you respond to these things. And if you don't follow us already, make sure you give us a follow on the whatever podcast, let me try to word this correctly. Whatever podcast host you decide to listen to, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or Google, which will soon be deleted. I think it's going to go to YouTube. But whatever you find us at, give us a follow, give us a rating, and don't be afraid to share us with your friends. Also, don't be afraid to kind of check us out on some of our other social media platforms, as in the Kountryfried Outdoors Instagram, that is spelled with a K, and also Kountryfried Outdoor Productions on YouTube. the deer that we're talking about is definitely posted on the YouTube channel. I put together a video for that. So it may be something to check out. But until then, folks, I really do hope you guys have fun chasing the experience that you want. And we hope that we inspire you to go out there and do that. And until our paths cross or they meet again, God bless you guys.